Again, I said this earlier, we're landing the plane, not in the sense of like he's got a big point he's going to make, but we're landing the plane in the sense of like it's getting into this dark zone and it's going to get darker, but he's going to kind of hit the bottom here. And so if you're feeling like depressed and dark and like what's going on in Ecclesiastes, good, it'll continue. But not for very many more verses. He's gonna sum it out a little bit. We're gonna see a little hope, and then he'll just kind of keep diving in to that. But it'll change a little bit as it goes. Good. So the ultimate conclusion he came to in this fourth dilemma is like, okay, maybe it's prudence. Maybe it's just living, the right balance between wisdom and folly, and living life well, live a healthy life. But in the end, actually, you're gonna die. Like everybody's gonna die. Whether you're sitting on the couch in the living room down here eating potato chips every day, or whether you're working out at the CrossFit gym, like just so you know, you will die. You're going to die. It doesn't matter where you spent your time, you're going to die. It doesn't mean that healthy living's not valuable. But if we put our identity in healthy living, if we think that's going to solve our problems, you're going to be disappointed, because you're going to die just like everybody else. Here's what he says, concluding that as he goes from there, he's like, okay, well, what's the conclusion to these dilemmas? And look at verse 17. Here's his conclusion. Verse 17, so I hated life. I tried significance. I tried wisdom, studying, understanding things. I tried pleasure. I tried prudence. In the end, everyone dies and nobody's significant. What's his conclusion? He's like, I hated life, because the work that's done under the sun actually is grievous to me. It hurts me. All of it is meaningless. It's all a chasing after the wind. Verse 18, I hated all things I had toiled for. Everything I worked for, I actually began to hate them. The things that I thought were going to give me pleasure, thought were going to give me purpose, ended up leaving me empty. And so, and this happens, people begin to hate the things they spent their life gaining because it stole from them or it didn't fulfill. I hated all the things I toiled for in the sun because I must leave them to one who comes after me. He's like, this is crazy. I have worked so hard for so much. I've built all this stuff. It took me years to build it, and I'm going to die, and somebody else is going to get what I worked for. Verse 19, and who knows whether this person who gets what I worked for, whether he'll be a wise man or a fool. He might be a total idiot. Yet he will have control over all the work into which I've poured my effort and my skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. He's like, no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I gain, somebody's going to end up with it who didn't actually work for it. They may be a total fool, and yet they'll get all I worked for. This is meaningless. Verse 20, so my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. I think it's interesting. He says, as he's been striving for all these things, significance, wealth, wisdom, prudence, and they've all come up short, and he's frustrated. He's like, this is like chasing after the wind. Maybe it's this other thing, trying to get it. When none of them pan out, he begins hating life. But actually, hating life is not the bottom. Like when you hate something, like it's pretty bad to hate something, but actually hating something means you love something else, right? Like you actually can't hate something without loving something. If you have hate, you have love. Now, a lot of hate comes out of because something you loved was taken, or you didn't receive something you loved, and so therefore the answer is hate. But it's not the bottom. If somebody hates somebody or something, there's actually still some passion in them, something they loved. I think of like those situations where somebody loses somebody in a really tragic situation, or it seemed unfair, and then they walk into a school or a movie theater or something like that with a gun, and they're angry, they're hating, and they're like, I'm going to deal with this. Because something I loved was taken from me, and so I'm going to go in and I'm going to deal with my hate. I'm going to start killing some people. But what often happens after that? It's such a normal story, sadly, in our world. They go into that school, to that movie theater, to that public building. They start shooting it up. They kill some people. And in the end, it didn't deal with the problem. In the end, they didn't feel satisfied. And way too often, they turn the gun on themselves and kill themselves. Because you see, they had hate. Hate counters fear, or love. There's hate and there's love. And then you act out your hate, and you realize it didn't bring you what you loved. And you're left with, I think, where Solomon goes, despair. Despair is like the bottom. You don't even have something you're loving. There's nothing left. You're in despair. I think of this, and again, I know this could be really sensitive for some of you guys. So often, a goal unmet leads to frustration. You have a goal, you have something you long for, something you're fighting for. Maybe you've lived for it your whole life. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's something good. But you have this goal, and you're not receiving that goal. You're not getting what you expected. And again, it might be a relationship with a parent. It might be, having something. It might be a place to live. And it's unmet, and so you get frustrated. It leads to frustration, which is normal. Like, it's normal when you can't get what you want or what you even should want. It's a good thing. It leads to frustration. The problem is, if you don't check your frustration unchecked, that initial feeling of frustration because a goal wasn't accomplished, if you let that fester, if you let that keep going, it turns into anger. A frustration unchecked leads to anger. Goal unmet leads to frustration. That's like the first part of Ecclesiastes we've seen. All these goals, all these things he's searching for, and he's getting frustrated. Then it's unchecked. He keeps going after it, and eventually it leads to anger. I hated life. I'm angry at this situation, at this person, at life itself. But anger unheeded, all of his hate, all of his anger, and nothing changes, it leads to despair. And that is a dark place to be. Again, like I said at the beginning, I know some of these are sensitive topics for people in this room, but I don't want to stay away from them because they're sensitive topics for people all over our country. We are in an era, and it's been going on, but I feel like in all new ways, where despair and discouragement and mental health is like such a big issue. And wow, if we can learn to understand, even in our own places of depression, our own places of despair, like what got me here? What pushes me from anger or frustration to this place of being totally in despair, and how do I find a way out? That is a great tool for you guys to have to meet a hurting world. And I think in the darkness of Solomon's story, he's going to start getting there. How do you find your way out of this place? At this point in Solomon's story, he's not there. He's in despair. What's his big thing for Solomon? It's like everything he worked for, everything he tried for, everything he gained. His big thing is, I'm going to die and it's going to go to somebody else. Somebody who didn't earn it, somebody who might be a total fool, and they're going to enjoy everything I worked for. Look at verse 21. He goes on in 21, kind of the same idea. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. You may do a really good job at living life, and then he must leave it, all he owns, to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all his toil? There's that question, what's in it for me? What do you get for all your toil and your anxious striving, which with he labors in the sun, all his days, his work, his pain, his grief, even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. Again, verse 21, for a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This is meaningless. This is like the rock bottom for Solomon. This is the depression of depressions, this despair where there's no more even hate for life, because in the end, somebody else is going to get everything I worked so hard for. And this is from a man not who's 18, 19, 20 years old. This is probably for a man who's 60, 70, 80. I don't know. He's spent his whole life building an empire. And he's like, a fool is going to be king. A fool will take over everything I worked for. And for him, that's the darkest place. And it's amazing because in the darkest place for Solomon, we actually have the light of the gospel. Who wants to work for what somebody else enjoys? That is the gospel, right? Like, that is the gospel. That Christ, if you looked at this, this person worked with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Christ comes to earth, not to mention he's the God of the universe. He made it all. He owns it all. He's beyond what we have. Christ is all those things. He came to earth. He lived perfectly with true knowledge, true wisdom, true skill. He lived a perfect life. Why? So he could die and give that life to people who hadn't worked for it, to fools like you and me. I mean, that is the thing that for Solomon is like, this is the darkest place of despair, is actually the window for the gospel, that Jesus is like, that's why I came, so that I could give it to people who didn't deserve it. I love this passage in 2 Corinthians 8:9. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. You see, the gospel is so countercultural to the ways of the world. The ways of the world says, hey, what's in it for you? What do you gain? That's what it's all about. And gain might for somebody be like a good family, a healthy family, like some good things. But again, the focus can be all about what's in it for you. It's good things, but the focus is self. And the idea of actually somebody else getting what you worked for just seems unfair. It's not how the world's supposed to work. If I work for it, I should get it. And almost all political issues, relational issues, come from that kind of concept of those who work for it should get the benefit of it. I mean, it just makes sense, right? And yet I love, that's not going to stay there. I'll put it here. I love that the gospel is so backwards. That Jesus was so excited, he had a joy to come and work for what we could not earn, to give us what we didn't deserve. That's the hope of the gospel. It's amazing. Solomon, of course, doesn't get that. At least he isn't in his writings right now. He's in this dark place. He doesn't know, or at least in this place, hasn't talked about the hope that's to come of one who actually took joy in this dark reality. You see, Jesus' goal wasn't himself, right? His goal, if we say a goal unmet leads to frustration, frustration unchecked leads to anger or hate, hate or anger unheeded, if it doesn't change, it leads to despair. Well, here we've got Christ. He comes. His goal was never himself. His goal was to do the will of the Father. His goal was to have a Shema heart, a hearing heart to God. And so as long as that was his goal, as long as he was doing it, it actually didn't matter what happened to him. Because he had a goal that couldn't be frustrated as long as he kept listening to the Father. He didn't have to deal with frustration that was unheeded because he wasn't frustrated if he was obeying the Father. And when they were ready to kill him and his life was going to be sacrificed so fools like you and me could get what he earned, he took joy in that because his goal was to obey the Father. It is huge what's at the center of the hub of your life. When you think about your life, what your goal in life is, what's at the hub, what's that primary question you ask, will affect whether your life is fulfilling or whether it leads to frustration, anger, and despair. If it's all about you, according to Solomon, dark days are coming. Verse 24, he makes a shift. And you're going to hear this shift, and we're going to see it throughout the book. Verse 24, and I call this a contentment stanza, and he's going to have a number of these where he basically finishes a really dark time and then says, here's what you should do in life. Here's the best you can do. Now, when I say it's not like, wow, it's awesome, we just hear about Jesus and the gospel, but it is a glimmer of hope, and I think it's part of what he wants us to see in the midst of this. Verse 24, it says, a man can do nothing better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in his work. A man can do nothing better than to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in his work. This, too, I see, is from the hand of God. This is like the first time God's brought into the picture, really. This, too, is from the hand of God. For without him, without God, who can eat and find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to one who pleases God. This, too, is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is he saying here? And we're going to see that there's these contentment stanzas that are going to come up through the whole book. He's going to hit a dark place, and then he's going to jump in either in the middle of it or at the end to these like contentment. The best you can do is to be content with what you have, content with what God's given you, to eat, drink, and enjoy this life he's giving you. What is he saying? I think at the heart of it is saying, rather than living a life where you're striving for more, constantly trying to get, I want, I saw, I got, learn to live a life of faith. Learn to live a life that says, God, what you give me, I'll live with. I'm going to be content with what you give. It doesn't mean you don't have ambition. Not selfish ambition, but actual ambition. It doesn't mean you, like, hey guys, none of you should try to have a career. Just be content being who you are. No, but in your career, as you pursue things that God puts on your heart, are you content with what he actually brings? You want to be a pastor. Are you content with the church he puts you in? Doesn't matter if it's a 5,000 person church or a 50-person church. Are you content with where he brought you? With your job, with your whatever it might be. So there's this, like, I think this calling that stands different from all the grabbing that we've seen so far. You know, what do I gain? What does a man get? And he's saying, you know what, the best you can do in life is actually to be content, to receive what God gives. That's where you find joy and happiness in life. You guys have probably seen, I grabbed this glove outside downstairs. I don't know whose it is. But you've probably seen a glove used as an illustration a lot. I love the picture of a glove. I think it's a great illustration of the Christian life. And I think it speaks a lot about this. You know, a glove kind of has these two aspects. There's a hand that is kind of in control, and then there's the glove itself, which is what goes around the hand. In the Christian life, we were never designed to be the hand. We were never designed to be the ones who could be kind of like create our own destiny, make life work for you. When you try to be the hand, when you try to be the one in charge and in control of how the world works, you end up getting disappointed. I mean, it's like Naya and I, just really simply, we can be like, man, let's plan our day. Beginning of the day, we're going to teach in the morning, and then as it goes into the afternoon, we've got this free time. Let's go to the beach. Let's lay out in the sun, you know. And if I'm like so set on I'm going to make that happen, and then I go to the beach and it's windy and it's rainy, it's like, bummer. I actually have no control over the wind and the rain. Like, and if that's my goal, if my goal is so set on going to the sun, being on the beach, being warm, no sand is being blown into my book, you know, whatever, and that's my goal, I'm going to get frustrated. And if my frustrated will not be heated. I can't get angry at the wind and say stop, you know, or at the rain, though it does kind of stop here pretty quickly. But if that's my goal, I'm trying to be the hand, and I can't be the hand. I can't control those things. It's out of my pay grade. I'm supposed to be the glove. Like there's a contentment in life that I'm supposed to have. I want to just look at this idea because it's going to come up a few times. And when I think about my life as a believer, this is probably one of the most important things for me to grasp. And I have to be reminded of it over and over again. So this is a reminder for you. Awesome. Because I need the reminder. That's a good loud thing. That's awesome. Here's a couple things about a glove. It's interesting. Oh, we're not going to do that one. Oh, I love that song. Okay, we've got a glove. Did you know that every glove has some rules? There's rules for gloves. All right? I'll show you. You might debate these rules. Number one, and you're going to see some parallels to the Bible here at some point, a glove by itself can do nothing. It's just the nature of a glove, right? Like, at least a glove is not meant to do anything by itself. It wasn't designed to be self-acting. You know, I could slap somebody with this glove, you know, or something like that. So this glove I could clean something with the glove. It could do something, but it can't really do what it was designed for by itself. It just can't. That's the rule number one of a glove. It's pretty straightforward. Rule number two for a glove with a hand in it looks like a hand. So if I have this glove and it's crunkled up into a ball in my pocket, as soon as I put my hand in the glove, it's kind of cool. The glove actually looks like a hand. Rule number three of a glove with a hand in it can do whatever the hand can do. I mean, this is crazy. So look at this. We've got a glove. Let's take this water bottle right here. You know, I could spend all afternoon or all, trying to pick up that water bottle with this glove. You know, I probably could hit it hard enough to knock it over, but if my goal was to pick it up and drink it, all day, can't do it. Glove by itself can do nothing. I put my hand in the glove, and watch this. This is pretty amazing. You guys ready? Remember?
I want to see you open it with one hand and
Look at that. I'm using two hands. That's okay. God's here too. Oh, it's great. I think this was my water. Hope so. So glove by itself can do nothing. Glove with a hand in it can do whatever the hand could do. It couldn't pick it up. Now it can. Here's my question. Who's holding the water bottle? My hand or the glove? Scientifically, the glove. Way to get scientific on it. How many guys think the hand is holding the water bottle? How many think the glove is holding the water bottle? Is the hand even touching the water bottle? No. Like, the hand is not touching the water bottle. Only the glove's touching the water bottle. So all of you guys who said the hand are holding it are wrong. Actually, you're not. You're also right. Because really, the glove is holding the water bottle in the strength of the hand, right? Like, the hand is carrying it, but the glove is the one touching it. And the strength of the hand, the glove is holding the water bottle. Again, super simple. 3 rules of a glove. A glove by itself can do nothing. A glove with a hand in it looks like a hand. A glove with a hand in it can do whatever the hand can do. Again, what's that? It does sound like a song. You've probably heard this before. It's totally fine. It's good news. This, in my mind, is the most important thing you can know about the Christian life is a glove. Well, why? Because Jesus was a glove. Did you know that? Did you know Jesus was a glove? You're like, no. He's a man. Yeah, exactly. Jesus was a glove. Look at this. A glove by itself can do nothing. John 5:19. You know what that says? You guys studied John. Anybody remember what John 5:19 says? John 5:19.
On my own authority, I can do nothing, but I do it through the authority of my Father.
Yes. I mean, basically, John 5:19 says this. Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself. So here's Jesus. Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son, Jesus, he says, can do nothing of himself unless it's something he sees the Father do. For whatever the Father does, these things the Son say in like manner. And then just a few verses later in John 5:30, he says, I can do nothing on my own initiative. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. When Jesus talks about himself, Jesus talks about him like a glove. He says, I can do nothing of myself. Which, I always thought was crazy, because when I think of Jesus, growing up, I thought of like the miracle worker, right? Yeah, look at all the things he did. But he wasn't. He says of himself, I can do nothing apart from the Father. He was like a glove. Second rule from a glove with a hand and it looks like a hand. I don't know if you remember John 14, 8 and 9. Philip talks to Jesus. There's some of the disciples there. Jesus has just said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father apart from me. And Philip says, show us the Father, and that'll be enough for us. Show us God. That'll be enough for us. What's Jesus' response?
Surely if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And soon after that, he talks about, I'm in the Father, and the Father is in me. So he says, by myself I can do nothing. And then he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You know, you want to see what God's like? Look at me. Well, that's kind of arrogant. Well, no, it's not arrogant. It's Jesus. He can do whatever he wants. Actually, that's not why he's not saying it. You can see, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father because I'm God. He's actually saying because the Father's in me and I'm in the Father. And the Father lives in me. He shows himself through me. Number 3, a glove with a hand in it can do whatever the hand can do. Like that water bottle. You know, I asked that question, to myself. Like, okay, Jesus says I can do nothing of myself. I'm like, well, what about all the miracles Jesus did? I mean, what about anybody know how many miracles Jesus did on earth? Anybody have? How many?
Can be written in all the books of the
Yeah, that's what John says, right? Like, he's like, I could have written more and more and more, How many miracles did Jesus do? Any guesses? 70? Did you look it up? No. Okay, I'm just kidding. You're getting. How many? 0. You know how many miracles Jesus did? 0. You guys know this. You've heard this, right? Jesus didn't do any miracles on earth. Look at Acts chapter 11. I love this verse. Acts 11. You're like, okay, wait a second. Blasphemy. It's kind of like the glove in the hand scenario with who's holding the water bottle. Acts chapter 2, verse 11. What does it say? Acts 2:11. 2:22, not 2:11. Acts 2:22. Men of Israel, he says, this is Peter speaking, men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus, the Nazarene, Jesus, a man attested to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs. You're like, ha-ha, there it is. Jesus did miracles, wonders, and signs. No, actually, keep reading. Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene, a man attested to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs. What does it say? Which God performed through him in your midst, just as you yourselves know. Acts 2, when Peter's talking to everybody, he says, yeah, you saw Jesus, miracles, wonders, and signs. Who does he give the credit to Jesus' miracles to? The Father. Again, this may be review for you, but it's so important and so valuable that when Jesus speaks about himself, he says, hey, I'm like a glove, I can do nothing. But with the Father in me, I look like the hand, I look like God. And he says, actually, everything that the Father can do, I can do because the Father's in me. Look at John 14:11. John 14:11, he says a similar thing there. John 14:11. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, otherwise believe because of the works themselves. So he says, as you see these works, what do these works show you? These works show you the relationship that I have with the Father. The Father's in me and I am in him. That's what it's pointing to. That's what the works point to, because it's God doing them through me. Now you might say, whoa, wait a second, Dan. Again, you've probably heard this, but I don't care, because it changed my life understanding this truth. Wait a second. Are you saying that Jesus isn't God? I mean, if Jesus is like a glove and he can do nothing, that doesn't sound very God-like. Are you saying that Jesus is not God? No. You've got to get that right. Jesus is God. He's always been God. He will always be God. But in Philippians, it talks about he didn't consider equality with God as something to be grasped or held onto. But he came in the form of a man to live the life of a man. My friend, his name is Ryan, I grew up with, his dad ran like a medical company. and he had a bunch of medical supplies always shipped to his house. It was kind of funny, like he distributed them. So they sent a bunch of stuff to his house, and he just sent them somewhere else. One of the things he always got were medical wheelchairs, but they were the really cool, like sports ones with like the sideways wheels. And so he had a parking lot with pavement, which was pretty rare in our town, and we would go over to his house, and he'd usually have like 5 or 6 of these wheelchairs in his garage at any given time, and he had a basketball hoop, and we would go and we would try to play wheelchair basketball. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen people who do that for real. Like, it's amazing. We were not amazing. Like, it was so hard. And we would say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, all of us are paraplegics. Like, none of us can use our legs. You're in your wheelchair. We'd throw the ball to each other. It would, you'd drop it. We'd, like, fall out of the wheelchair and crawl on the ground. I mean, we were the total, like, we probably looked like idiots. Like, crawling on the ground, grabbing the basketball. Like, it was hard. And for 30 minutes, we'd play this game. We'd laugh. We'd get bruised up. After the 30 minutes, what would we do? We'd get out of the wheelchair. We'd fold it up. We'd put it in the garage. The whole time, we could walk. But for that 30 minutes, we decided we were going to play basketball like we couldn't walk, as if we were paraplegics. We were going to live that way. Jesus, and it's not a perfect picture, a perfect parallel, but the way the Bible explains Christ is that he came as God, creator of the universe. God, I don't know if you knew that God made the world through Christ, which there's some other interesting things in that. But Jesus came as a man, a human being, not as Superman. I think that's how I thought about Jesus, is he was like Superman. He could do all these special things, and he was a man. 100% God, 100% man, which is true, but functionally, he lived as a man, as a glove. So I can do nothing apart from my Father. Because a man can't do the kinds of things that Jesus did. It's impossible. But God can. And so he came to live like a man. For those 33 years, looking like God, because God lived in him, doing the things of God. He even says, the very things I say because my Father tells me. So even the things he says are what God instructs him. I don't know how that worked. I don't think he had an earpiece. I don't know the nuances of that, but that's what he says. Everything I do because the Father tells me. These signs, miracles, and wonders are God working through the Son. Peter says, Acts 2:22. He says, that's what you saw when you saw Christ. We might be like, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal, and this is what was earth-shattering for me, having grown up in the church, having read these passages my whole life, is that we also were meant to be gloves. We were made to be gloves. I mean, look at the rules. A glove by itself can do nothing. You guys probably know John 15:4-5. I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me and I in you, and you will bear much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. I mean, again, I'm sorry that this is a repeat, but I'm not sorry that this is a repeat if you've heard it, because it's so good. I probably heard it my whole life until it clicked. Until all of a sudden my mind connected with the words and I realized the amazing truth of the message, which is really a part of the gospel, huge part of the gospel, that Christ lived this life, and he says the same about himself. He says, I can do nothing apart from the Father, and then he turns it around to us and says, hey, you're like a glove, you can do nothing apart from me. Amazing. A glove with a hand and it looks like a hand. 2 Corinthians 3:18 for one example. It says we are looking like in a mirror, on the Lord, and we see him. And I'm going to misquote it. I'm getting mixed up with the other Corinthians passage about the mirror. 2 Corinthians 3:18. He says this, now the Lord is a spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as the Lord the Spirit. That as the Spirit of the Lord is in us, as God's life is in us, he's beginning to make us look like him. That same picture. A glove with a hand and it looks like a hand. And then finally, a glove with a hand and it can do whatever the hand can do. John 14:12. It's one of those verses that are like so confusing, when you're younger and you're like, what in the world does that mean? What does he say? John 14. Verse 12, he says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also. And greater works than he will do, because I go to my Father." The way that Jesus describes our life is that it will be like his. In fact, he says even greater works than he did, you'll do. I mean, that's crazy. Again, you may have heard this, but we can't hear it often enough. That the amazing gift of Christ is we get to see what it looks like to be a human, to be a glove, to be somebody who can do nothing by themselves, but filled with the power and life of God, can actually look like God and do the things of God because God lives in them. That's what Christ shows us. And of course, he died on the cross to take care of our sin. That tends to take the main focus. But here's the deal. Think about this glove, and let's fill it with this water bottle. Okay, if this is my life and this water bottle is sin, all right, sin is in me, how am I going to get my hand in there? Right? How do you get your hand? How do I get my hand in this glove? If the goal of the glove is to be filled with my hand, that's what it was designed for. It can't do anything without the hand. How do I get my hand in there? You got to take out the water bottle. But you don't take out the water bottle and say, "Sweet, it's done," right? Because the whole purpose for taking out the water bottle is so I can put the hand in the glove, right? And so what does the cross do? We have this sin problem in our lives where we have this separation from God because of sin, and the cross takes care of the sin issue. He dies to take care of the sins that we've done. Again, you've heard this, I'm sure, but why? Not just to leave us saying, "Yes, so glad Jesus died for my life. I'm so glad he died." Yes, am I glad he died for me? Absolutely. Am I glad he took care of sin? Absolutely. But why did he die? He died so he could be raised to actually live in me. When I was in your seats in England, okay, Bible school, for many of you guys right out of high school, for me, I was right out of high school. Some of you guys are a little bit older. But I was sitting in your seat, and I was an absolutely insecure 18-year-old. I've always been an insecure person. From, I don't know, as early as I can remember to when I'm 44. Always nervous about what people think. Always looking down on myself. And my insecurities, I remember especially as I was 18, and here I am in England at this Bible school, and I kind of assumed that when I left home, I could be a different person. Like, I'm going to leave my insecurities and my fears and worrying about what people thought about what I was wearing and how I was looking and all that. I was like, sweet, I'm going to leave those behind in Estes Park, and I'm going to go to England, and I can kind of be a new person. I can be confident in myself, like all the other people I see. The bummer is I brought myself with me, with all my insecurities. One of the things I've learned over my years of pastoring in a church and then of working at Timberline is that everybody's insecure. Some of us are better at hiding it. We all have our insecurities. That was freeing for me because I thought I was the only one. But I remember sitting there at Cape and Ray so insecure. I had a grandfather who was an amazing teacher on both sides of my family. My parents were teachers. You've had my mom and my dad here. My younger brother was a really good kid. My older brother was liked by everybody. And all I could think about myself is how insignificant I am, how little I can live up to the expectations that I have for myself because I really want to do something big, but I'm just me. And I thought the key to the Christian life, the key to me becoming the kind of Christian that God wanted was for me to kind of, grow some. Get out there. Get out there and teach. Get out there and stand up and preach what I believe in. I needed to deal with my insecurities and just get confident in myself. And it was amazing as I began reading John and to hear that truth that Jesus says, I can do nothing. The Son can do nothing. Because you see, that I understand. That I get. If Jesus can say, I can do nothing. If Jesus boasts in his insecurities, inabilities, not so much insecurity, more inability, I thought the key to the Christian life was to overcome my inabilities, to overcome my insecurity, instead of to embrace my insecurity, to embrace my inability. Because Jesus had no problem recognizing that he couldn't do it, because he knew he had the life of God in him. The Son can do nothing apart from the Father, and yet he lived this life believing in the things that God would do through him, and which God did do through him. All of a sudden, the Christian life like blew up in my mind, because it wasn't about me doing something, being something, dealing with the things I didn't like about myself. It was actually me accepting my weakness, that the God of the universe lived in me. I remember my grandpa had a super huge influence on a lot of people growing up. And I would hear it my whole life. I was in kind of a bubble where that's what I would hear all the time. In a lot of ways, there's aspects of you guys here at Anchor House that's a result of the work that my grandpa did when Rick went there and went to the Bible school that my grandpa started. And my whole life was like that. I kept hearing, here's what your grandpa did. That was on my dad's side. On my mom's side, I don't know if you know who Billy Graham is and the Billy Graham Crusades, but Billy Graham and my other grandpa started the Billy Graham Association. And so if I was in some circles, all I'd hear was about that grandpa, and other circles, all I'd hear about was this grandpa. And the influence and the impact and how they came to know the Lord through, it was like over and over again, which I loved. It was exciting. But I looked at my life, and I was like, that's definitely not me. I'm just Dan. And I remember sitting there one day in college, and I'd been grasping this idea and so excited about the reality that actually it's Christ who lives in me. The God of the universe lives in me. That my potential, and this is true of every single one of you, how big is your potential? It's as big as God, because he lives in you. What holds back God from being God in your life is you. Now, we don't get to choose what he does. It may be cleaning the toilet because there's a little pee somebody left on there, and you feel like, hey, I don't want anybody else to walk in and see that. Is that any less amazing, miraculous, godly than raising the dead? No. And so you come into the bathroom and you see that, and you say, God, do you want me to deal with that? He's like, that'd be kind. I'm kind. All right, I'll do it. And that's amazing. And so here I am. I have this grandpa on one side, grandpa on the other, always, but yet I'm grasping this idea of Christ is in me, the God of the universe, the potential in my life is God, and yet every time I thought about my grandpa, I was like, well, I can never be like him. I could never impact people like him. And I realized that that was sinful thinking. For me to think, and it felt humble, like, oh, I could never do like what my grandpa did. That felt humble. The reality was that was sin, and it was from the devil. Because it's placing, in a sense, my grandpa as the final authority, the one who does. And I remember, it sounds arrogant, but I remember writing in my journal in big letters, and it was so hard for me to write, but I wrote, I could kick my grandpa's butt in ministry. And I had to say the word but because my grandpa hated when people used the word but. I could kick my grandpa's butt in ministry. Had nothing. It sounds like such an arrogant statement. Had nothing to do about arrogance. It had to do about I need to stop placing people as the authority in my life. It's God who lives in me. People should never be our standard. God is our standard. When you walk out of this door this afternoon, you don't look at, I hope I can be more like a person, because that sets that person as the kind of pinnacle of your life. What if God wants you to do something different than that person, or more than that person, or maybe something way over here? It's like God is the center of our life. He's the one who lives in us. And for the first time, I began to feel freedom. Freedom to realize, yeah, I'm not that important. I am insignificant. I am by myself weak. At the same time, so excited about what God might want to do through me. And confident. To where I can go and teach, even though I'm scared half to death, and say, God, I trust that you're going to do something through the glove of my life, because that's the kind of thing you do. Bringing it back to Ecclesiastes, I think the reality is the biggest challenge in the church today is not that we're too weak. It's not that we have weak Christians. I think it's actually the biggest challenge is that we think we're too strong. That we have a really hard time trying not to be the hand. I look at Ecclesiastes up to this point, and Solomon is just fighting to be the one controlling his own destiny. How can I be significant? How can I have enough wisdom? How can I enjoy pleasure and enjoy the world? How can I live a prudent life? And in the end, he's like, it just left me empty, like chasing after the wind. What's his conclusion? Be content with what God gives you. Be, instead of the hand, be the glove. Say, God, I don't know what you want to do in my life. Yeah, if it was miracles and an awesome thing and speaking in front of people, that's amazing. If all you want me to do is serve faithfully in some small way the rest of my life, that's just as amazing. My goal is to obey God, not to have some ministry. If your goal is obedience to God, then nothing gets in the way other than yourself. And you won't get frustrated, and you won't get angry, and you won't get in despair. If your goal is to have a certain ministry, certain number of followers, certain number of people in the youth group, whatever that might be, and that doesn't happen, then it comes frustration. And frustration turns to anger. And anger leads to despair. And you leave the ministry. And you divorce your wife. And you ruin the taste of Christ to the world. Why? Because your goal was wrong. I think our goals are meant to be, God, help me be the best glove I can be. Just a listening heart like Solomon. God is really good at being God. He is. God's really good at being God. We need to learn to be really good at being man. Really good at being a glove. God's great at being a hand. We need to learn to be good at being a glove. We're going to see, again, Solomon's not going to come there. This is pre-Christ. He's not, but there's elements of that are true even as we see the Old Testament and God working through Moses and other people. You see the idea of the God of the universe working through his humanity the way he designed for Adam and Eve. Solomon's going to hint at it, just here and there, till he gets to the end. Most of it's going to be dark, but interesting, because it ties into the world we live in. But I think if there's one thing that I pray for you this week, regardless of how many times you've heard this concept, it would be that would sink into your heart. That's my prayer for you. Beyond anything else, I could care less if you learn Ecclesiastes. The thing I want most for you is that you understand when Christ died on the cross to get sin out of your life, he rose again to actually put his very life into yours so that the Christian life is not just a religion, not just boxes to check off. It's a living relationship with the one who made Kauai, in all its beauty, that God lives in you for whatever he has for your life. And if your goal in life is to just listen, hearing heart, just like Solomon, then you won't get frustrated because you're open for whatever the hand gives you. You're content. You don't get angry. And if you do, you find your way back. Depression, yeah, it might come. But you can find your way out of depression because your goal, your primary goal, is listening to the Lord. That's at least where I've begun. As a 44-year-old, just little by little in my life, understanding it more and more. Let me pray, and we'll take our break for lunch. Lord, I thank you for this reality, Lord, of your life in us. And if there's one thing that I know I don't live in the fullness of, that I wish I did, and I need the reminder every single day, it'd be this reality that I'm just a man, I am a glove, but you are the hand, and you were designed, and you designed me to be filled with your life. Lord, I pray that at every moment I would be living this life that you've called me to, that even sitting at lunch today, Lord, I would have an attitude of heart that says, God, whatever you want for lunch, this is your gig, this is your hour. Do lunch in and through me. Whether I know it or not, I'm available to you. Lord, and I pray that for this class, that we would find the hope and the peace and the joy of living life in you, regardless of our circumstances, unlike Solomon, who found frustration, anger, despair, because he tried to be something he wasn't. Lord, we thank you in your name. Amen. Thanks, guys.